On your table, Joey has been nice enough to hand out an exercise that we're going to end up doing later. Because this is educational, Jackie told me I had to do a handout and exercise. So you've got them both on one sheet. And we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to sort of come back and we'll do this very difficult exercise. You'll feel that it was like a test. And ultimately, if you pass, then you'll probably get a certificate from Joey saying, well done. And Joey will help you. The standard segmentation that most hotel companies use, I put up 5 major segments that are listed on the presentation screens and behind me. Transient. So if you're kind of following along, there's a slight difference between my slide and what's on the handout. Even though I did them both, I started to differentiate because the minute you start to segment, you're thinking, this isn't enough. And you keep segmenting more and more and more until you get to a point where people aren't measurable. But I put the 5 biggies up. So these are the major segments. Transient. An individual customer that comes into your hotel that generally isn't associated with any corporation, any event, or any agent. And they generally book things like bar. They book bar discounts, they book packages. So they're kind of defined somewhat by how they're booking and what they're booking. If you look next at the corporate negotiated section. This tends to be something that's been set up by our sales department. They've gone out and they've talked to corporations. They have defined a price point that we're going to follow. They've defined a room category that's going to be used, and they define who are the customers that actually can use it. We then get into wholesale. Somewhat of a dirty word right now. Wholesale historically has been something that's a rate that's been given out to agents that are about a 20 to 30% discount. The agents then would turn around and mark it up. They would create brochures, they would advertise, they'd go out and find customers, and they'd deliver the price-based cheaper rooms into the hotel. They would keep the margin between what we originally charged and what they had charged their customers. Internal. This is always a fun one. It's what I affectionately call the general manager's rate. So if you've been a revenue manager, you're sitting in an email and you look at it and think, okay, where did that rate come from? And generally it came from the executive office, it came from the general manager. But it also covers things like staff rates, friends and family rates. It could be contra business that's been booked, it could be free rooms that have been given out or business trips. And you want to hold it in a category by itself because it would hurt one of the other categories you're going to put it into, or one of the other segments. So the general manager's rates, they sit on their own. In terms of the last major segment is groups. And anyone that has convention facilities like this is used to groups. Sometimes groups are in-house and they're part of a big event. It's a negotiated rate, it's a set number of rooms, usually the sales department's involved, or it could be a room-only type piece of business. So again, on the handout sheet, you've got the 2 different ways that they could be divided. So these are the major segments. But that's not it. That's the beginning of where you start. You start with the major segments. When I was with Hilton, I think we had 32 minor segments. And they would be categorized into those 5 major segments. But they would break down things into sort of bar versus advanced or premium versus discounted. And in that, I've done premium and discounted on the sheet that you've got in front of you. But then there's some new categories that have started to come up. With the meta search stuff that's out there, you could be getting transient business that's coming in commissionably, or you can get transient business on your own website that's coming in non-commissionably. So some hotel companies now are dividing and looking at those 2 different ways. You can also have corporate rates that are coming in under the OTAs. And the only way you can identify this is the front desk clerk actually has to think, this customer doesn't look like he's here for a leisure weekend. He's in a business suit, he's carrying a briefcase, he's probably here for business calls. And it starts to get a bit blurry, and sometimes the term leisure comes in. And that's really when you can't tell by looking at an OTA booking whether the customer is here on leisure or on business. We've of course got last room availability, non-last room availability, wholesale by geographical regions. We talked a little bit about where people were coming from inside of Macau. Singapore would have probably a very similar pattern in this building, but the rest of Singapore would end up with a different type of breakdown. I know the Hilton breakdown, I believe it used to be almost by continents. So it wasn't overly helpful if you were sitting in Japan and you needed to know what was going on in the Japanese market, but you would know if a lot of people were coming in from Europe. I know when I was with Langham, we took over a property in California, and the previous company that was running it was Ritz-Carlton, and they would divide by the 5 major areas inside of the USA. So you'd end up with these sort of blocks of states that they would divide by, and then everyone else would just be grouped into the rest of the world, which was very appropriate for that property where you would be drawing all your general business coming from inside of the US. Groups with events, groups with room only. I broke that down again on the presentation or the handout that you got. And this is kind of how we would do segmentation by market. So what brings a customer into your property based on what they're doing in your area. So it's now time for the exam portion. In front of you, you've got the presentation, the little handout sheet. There's 2 columns that exist on the side. This is the test. First column says city hotel. Second column says resort hotel. And we're going to go through each one of the segments, and we're going to make a decision on whether you think a city hotel gets a lot of this segment, gets a little bit of this segment, or gets none. And I'm going to get you to write a lot, a little, or none into the column that's written there. So let's start off and we'll look at transient bar. Do the city hotels get a lot of transient bar? Do they get a little bit of transient bar? Do they get none? Same with the resort hotel. Do they get a lot? Do they get a little? Do they get none?
I'm a little bright.
Okay, Joey's doing the actual corrections afterwards. So if we go into transient discount, a lot, a little, none. Some people are already finished. Corporate is next. Do you get a lot of it? Do you get a little bit, depending on whether you're a city hotel or a resort hotel? You then have wholesale, a lot, a little, none. Other, internal, the GM's rate, a lot, a little, or none. Then you have 2 different divisions of group. One is in-house group, one is a room-only category or a leisure-based category. Again, do you get a lot in a city hotel? Do you get a little in a city hotel? Do you get none? Sometimes it's easier to think about a specific property when you're doing the exercise. So has everyone managed to get all the way through to the bottom and written down all of those different differentiators? I'll give you a few more seconds because Joey will eventually cut me off. And so okay for time.
You're actually doing pretty good time.
Okay. Did anyone get an identical segmentation in the city hotel to the resort hotel? Just a show of hands. Who found them exactly the same? I got one person that found exactly the same. 2. How many people found that there were differences in the way the segmentation was done based on whether it was a leisure type hotel or whether it was a corporate type hotel? What are the major differences? Just yell it out. We're a small group. You got big voices. Michelle, what did you find?
I think, pretty much the same people.
Okay. What differences are there? If someone found a difference, what differences did you see?
Corporate versus wholesale.
So in a city hotel, you tend to have a lot more corporate. In a resort hotel, you tend to have a lot more retail. Wholesale.
Business group and leisure group.
Okay. Which one? Because it depends on which kind of property you were thinking of. So.
City hotel has a lot of business groups.
Okay. Again, it depends on, in your mind, what kind of hotel you were thinking of. If you were thinking of a resort in Phuket that has lots of convention facilities, they might have had a lot of. If you were thinking of Joey's hotel with 40 villas only, and there's no meeting space, you're not going to have any. So the reason we do the exercise is to sort of indicate that everyone ends up with a different market segmentation in general. There will be minor differences, if nothing else. You can have 3 hotels that are on 3 corners of a block, and they'll end up with segmentation that's different because of the way they're targeting business. This is market segmentation. Does anyone have any questions of market segmentation before we move on? Yes?
I have a question. So how about package? Which category do you put package? Is it under the transient discount or more like, for example, if a room is breakfast, then does it go to bar?
The question is, where do you put package? You've hit one of the gray areas. In some companies, you will price packaging at a full bar level, and you don't take the inclusions out, so you'll leave them as full bar. In some companies, you pull the revenues out and you transfer it into the F&B department immediately, and you would put it into this area. It comes almost down to what the accounting systems are that you follow. Land, we would have left it in bar because we were still getting a good rate for it. It actually helped our average rate, so we didn't do the transfer out immediately. We kept it in ADR, so it went in as full bar. In the casino environment, you pay for everything. So as much as people talk about getting stuff for free, if you put a bed and breakfast together and the restaurant's charging you $25 US per person, right off the top of your rate, $25 per US per person goes off the rate. Even though the company that owns the hotel is the company that owns the restaurant, money transfers instantly from one pocket to the other to keep the accounting system. So it can go in either way. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about, we're talking about segmentation by purpose here.
Yes.
Is there any thoughts that you have, because we're in a debate right now internally, because we have some segments right now that are more channel related, that is built in to the segmentation that's based on purpose. So there's like one or two, such as OTAs, for example. We've had OTAs as a segment, and we're looking whether or not to keep that as well, because that's actually the only segment that we have right now that's more related to a channel versus a purpose.
Okay, and I hope I can answer this. We're going to go into channel segmentation next. I personally think you should still be able to define the reason the customer is coming in. And I don't think OTA should be a market segment. I do think you need to review it under channel segmentation, and they are two wholly different areas that you need to look at. So my choice, if I could set segmentation, would be I would still be following the purpose of the visit, which would be transient bar or transient discount. Ultimately, OTA should reside in the channel management discussions, in my mind. Every hotel company is different, and there is no consistency. So the fun I had with putting a segmentation presentation together is no one follows anything. So we try and be as complicated as possible. Thank you.